breaking down the Legacy Cup and Legacy Art events from MagicCon Vegas.
Next on Eternal Durdles.
Extreme thank you to all the Dirtomaniacs that support the show. If you want to get ad-free content and extra free content, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles and support us. Proceeds go to editing the show, upgrading equipment, and helping us travel to events. What it do? Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, we learned some things from MagicCon Vegas about what we're going to likely see at Eternal Weekend. We learned some things.
We learned so many things at MagicCon Vegas, actually.
We learned some things, man.
You can check out the, I would wait till the end normally. Please go check it out afterwards. There is an amazing interview that Phil and I did with Aaron Forsyth and Blake Rasmussen, where they talk about the ban restricted announcements and how they will be looking at those in the future. And also, there's a little comment about a possible incoming Legacy panel in the future. So definitely check that video out once you finish this and find out more about that. I'll make sure to make that the video at the end that plays after this video. Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned. So, to that end, Phil, we have some results here from the Legacy Cup that had 125 people, and I think 69 for the it was actually probably 70 for the Legacy for Art event that happened on Saturday. So Friday and Saturday events at MagicCon, very close. These are probably the biggest tournaments that are going to happen until Eternal Weekend. So they give us a good bird's eye view of what the format might look like at Eternal Weekend.
Yeah, and it is the major archetypes that we saw show up were major archetypes that I feel like are on everybody's radar. But we got a little bit more detail as to how you might want to sideboard against the nuanced differences between the lists, which is important because those subtle changes will make the difference against a lot of things. So, shall we just jump into one of these events here?
Yeah, let's start with the Cup. The Cup. So let's just break down the top 8 real fast. So Naya Depths ended up winning the event. And then we have Esper Stoneblade, played by Max Gilmore, Max Torsion. We have Cephalid Breakfast, played by Ogre Bard. Then we have Dimir Reanimator, Azorius Control, Grixis Control, Dimir Reanimator, and then Dimir Reanimator. For some reason, Honorog's in here, but he either didn't play in the event, maybe he did play in the event, but I don't have a deck list for him. So we're gonna just choose this other Reanimator list as the that's in 9th place as our 8th place. Our next closest piece of information. So that is 3 Reanimator lists, a couple of control lists, which is pretty wild, a breakfast list, a Naya Depths list, and so it's a pretty interesting swath of different decks. Also, Grixis Control. Whoa.
Yeah, the Grixis Control list is a 4-bolt for Orcus Bowmaster list. So on the controlling side of things, like it's got some Snapcaster Mages and some Baleful Strix, but then it's trying to beat up the meta a little bit with 2 Cling to Dust main, and then it's moved over to playing 3 Fatal Push and 2 Sheoldred's Edict, so a lot of removal. And then it's pairing Bolt and Kolagon's Command with the pings from Bowmaster. But it is clearly a Bowmaster list first, because the only 4 ofs in the deck are Bowmaster, Brainstorm, Force of Will, Lightning Bolt, and Ponder. And then you have 19 lands, which is a lot lower than most like Grixis Control lists of old. The curve stops at Snapcaster Mage. So it is a much leaner version of the Grixis Control list that we've seen in the past. And it has moved away from Planeswalkers and towards Orcus Bowmaster and Psychic Frog as its ways to just clown people. It was the most dedicated, like, of all the decks that we've seen. One thing that's important, and this deck is sort of indicative of it, is between the Dimir Reanimator lists and the Dimir tempo lists, one thing that we've seen was for a while, Bowmaster was sort of not all that present in the format. It was very good against the Dimir Reanimator list. Ever since Fnatic came out, it seems like there's been this heavy shift back towards Bowmaster getting back into 75s. Like, it no longer, I feel like the Bowmaster or no Bowmaster is really the question amongst most deck lists now. You can presume that they're going to have at least a pair if they're Reanimator somewhere in their 75. Most likely they're board, but that's not necessarily always the case. There were definitely some players that I played against that had Bowmasters in the main that were also on the Reanimator list. There was the tempo lists are all on 3 to 4 Bowmaster. Like, Bowmaster is just back in force, is what it feels like, because of the surge of Dimir tempo. And the Dimir tempo list just eschews the Reanimator package, gets rid of Entombs and Reanimates and all that, and adds in Nethergoyfs and Tamios and apparently Bowmasters. So knowing the difference, like the second that you see those kinds of threats, you know that you're not playing against Entomb. I think that's important. Unless somebody's trying to do some sort of hybrid, in which case, okay, cool, they got you. But for the most part, if you see a Tamio or if you see a Nethergoyf, it's very clearly that they are not Entomb, because it's one of those slots that are taking that card. And that also presumes that you have to play around Bowmaster in that matchup. And then against Dimir Reanimator, until they show you otherwise, you have to presume that in games 2 and 3, you're also going to be playing against Bowmaster if you're a deck that Bowmaster would be good against. So, which is most of the top form of the format right now, whether that's Breakfast or Nadu or opposing Dimir players. So anticipate that Bowmaster comes in. Bowmaster also is a way to sort of keep a Tamio in check, which is a big deal. So I imagine that there's also some play with that, because once it flips as a target, having a thick beater that caught a cantrip or preventing them from cantripping, otherwise you ping down their Tamio, there's some tension there, which is interesting. They also can't ultimate their Tamio if a Bowmaster's on the board. That also carries some tension, so they have to play where they're using it as effectively a Snapcaster Mage. So there is some nuance that is there, but I feel like that sort of has sifted much clearer from these kinds of events, because we're seeing it not like there's always a difference between what you see online versus what you see in paper, but we're seeing that translate to paper. That showed up pretty clearly through both of the events, both the Cup and the original art. We saw a lot of Dimir. We saw a lot of Nadu, but like for all the Dimir decks, we saw a lot of Bowmaster.
Yeah, I mean, the major outlier here being the Naya Depths deck that took out the event, which doesn't care about Bowmaster, ain't playing Bowmaster either,
Yeah, and there it actually doesn't get caught by, like, there's nothing. There's nothing we see. One thing to note though that I do want to bring up is that the top decks, right? So if we are looking at the Legacy Cup, one thing to notice is the top 8. There was a bunch of Dimir Reanimator in there, but first place, second place, third place, fifth place, and so yeah, first place, second place, third place, and fifth place. Naya Depths, 4 Swords to Plowshares. Esper Stormblade, 4 Swords to Plowshares. Cephalid Breakfast, 4 Swords to Plowshares, as well as Control, 4 Swords to Plowshares. So the way that you can actually beat the big black Reanimator creatures that just come in with power and toughness that are on Atraxa is Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, and it obviously is good against Psychic Frog too. It's an outright get that off the board.
Yeah. So I mean, if anything, I think the Legacy Cup was sort of the showcase for Swords to Plowshares, because the one unifying factor between all those lists doing well, between Naya Depths, Esper Stormblade, Cephalid Breakfast, Azorius Control, like the Azorius Control list is not Azorius Control. It's Stifle Knot. It's Blue-White Stifle Knot.
Okay.
Like more specific, like it's Doorkeeper Thrall Stifle Knot. So when we say Azorius Control, because it's how they listed it, but it is Dreadnought. It is straight up like we are dedicated to Null Drifter and Phyrexian Dreadnought with a Doorkeeper Thrall in play with our Stifle effects. So, but between those lists, like you can argue Stifle Knot is an A+B combo deck, right? Like you're assuming that if you do the thing, you do the thing, even though it's got a little bit of grind to it. But that's a 4 Swords to Plowshares deck. You have Cephalid Breakfast, which is very much a combo deck that has the backdoor of Urza Saga and Nadu, but also Swords to Plowshares. Then you have Esper Stoneblade in the hands of Max Gilmore, who we got to chat with a bit and talk about how that list has been serving him pretty well. That's also a Bowmaster list, but it is all of the good parts of blue and black and swapping the Reanimator package for white cards, a la Stoneforge Mystic, Pre-War, Formal Wear, and Swords to Plowshares, and then Naya Depths, 4 Swords to Plowshares. So even though all of these decks do have, pseudo I win buttons in them. The one unifying factor between them is that they do have white cards in their deck, and it happens to be Source to Plowshares. So Source to Plowshare stock should probably go up because it is showing these kinds of results. And I imagine that the Dimir Reanimator players will have to think about what they want to do to combat that. And, it's possible, man. I mean, we were talking about it. Like, we were talking about how Valgavoth, if you just wanted something stickier, like that's like you can reload, but
people were playing it over the weekend. I don't know what deck list had it, but somebody told me that they got with a Valgavoth, so it can happen.
And Valgavoth, for those who don't know, is the new 9/9 flying lifelinker that has a Leyline of the Void tacked onto it that also lets you cast your opponent's stuff for free, but it has ward that's like unpayable to anybody.
Sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. Ward.
Yeah, so it's like
ward.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, you have to have the removal spell, and then also you have to just annihilate your board.
Yeah,
so it's like
ridiculous.
Okay, that's just not going to happen by the time they do anything, because they just get to cast everything for free, whenever you play something. So like if it goes to your graveyard, it's exiled, and then they just get to cast it. So I mean, they have to pay life to cast it, sure, but like Valgavoth is a pivot if Source to Plowshares starts showing up, because you know what? Who doesn't care or give a shit about Source to Plowshares is Valgavoth. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see some amount of pivot away from one of the two Reanimator targets, whether that's Archon or Atraxa, and move over to Valgavoth, because Valgavoth also doesn't give a shit about Karakas. Like Atraxa can sort of be muted a little bit by Karakas, by like it goes back in, even if they find the wasteland. Like, okay, then now they need a way to dump the Atraxa and then reanimate like a bunch of loops that in time that Karakas can rebuy, and so Archon is good in that space because it can't get Karakas. But Valgavoth also very difficult to Karakas because you would have to annihilate your board.
You can't even sack the Karakas to it.
You can't sack it So
that's an interesting choice. Is like this being like, hey, I've got a threat that you're not going to be able to deal with.
And Valgavoth has a little bit more reasonable text than what Sauron the Dark Lord has, which is sacrifice a legendary artifact. Now that also is never leaving the board, but it also is not necessarily as impactful on the table as a
9/9 with flying and flying. I think it has trample.
It has lifelink.
Lifelink, yeah, that's just bonkers. But there was a point where I thought, the thing is like, come on, why can't Sauron have flying? Like, at least, there's no reason why a Maiar can't fly. But
he builds his own army. That's why
he does build his own orc army. I played an EDH. I love that as a commander. Super fun card, but it's impactful in like a completely different way, and one that's not as relevant in Legacy, I think. But let's take a quick walk through your. This will be a short one. I'll walk through your tournament because this is the one you played in. So you played Dimir Reanimator, something that's not listed, Grixis Control, Dimir Aggro.
The something that's not listed is Oops All Spells.
Oops All Spells. Oh, I remember that. Yeah. I was there for that. We'll definitely talk about that round. Okay, so we got Dimir Reanimator, Oops All Spells, Grixis Control, Dimir Aggro, Dimir Tempo, I'm assuming.
Dimir Tempo,
Cloud Post, and then Bant Nadu. And so you went 4, 2, and 1. Your losses were to the Grixis Control deck and the Cloud Post deck. Cloud Post being like specifically a deck that like is good against Miracles in a classic like Legacy 2014 matchup.
Yeah. That's the one matchup where you're like you forever concede it, and also they got better because they got Sowing Michael Spawn and one ring.
Yeah, and then you drew against Dimir Aggro, which is a feat because that's a I would say it's a deck that generally does not go to time.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the Tameo back and forth stuff. There was a lot of like super tight intricate decisions. My tournament was the example, and this is where I point like learning the nuances of like where the format moved a bit. Was we played in the event, and I felt very good against Dimir Reanimator. I had a very like clean plan against it. I beat it up a couple times, and exactly the things that I experimented with that I wanted to do came to fruition every time. And I was like, yep, this is by design how the games against Dimir Reanimator should play out. of course, there were some moments where I got lucky, some moments where I got unlucky. Same thing for my opponents. But like, all in all, like how the game on papers, like you think it plays out, that's how it did for Dimir Reanimator. So I felt good playing against it, and then my results against Dimir Reanimator showed as I didn't lose to it. Then what I did learn though, playing against Grixis Control, which was that 4 Bowmaster plus Kolagonk's command to rebuy Bowmaster deck. My deck already struggles. I was playing 4 Brainstorm and 4 Brain Surge. Like Bowmaster is going to be the bane of my existence. And what I realized is that in my 75, because people had been moving away from Bowmaster, and the Dimir Reanimator players that I played against, they were not heavy on Bowmaster if they had any at all. And so without that critical piece against me, I just don't fear really anything as much, because Bowmaster solos, right? Like I fear Bowmaster more than I fear Atraxa. And playing against the Grixis list, where I wasn't sure what he was on, right? Like he was playing a brew. So I was like, okay, we have 2 brewskis going against each other, but his brew happened to have a pre-boarded nightmare for me, which is like just endless Bowmasters.
Yeah,
and so
Bowmasters into Bowmasters.
I learned pretty quickly that I was under indexed for that, which is why I brought it up first thing in at the beginning of knowing the nuance. If you know your deck has a problem against something as we go into Eternal Weekend, like make sure that you are prepared for it, or like have done research to make sure that it is not something that is showing up in common lists. Because going into this event, Bowmaster was not showing up commonly in lists, and it was at this event that I was like, oh wow, there was a much denser plethora of Bowmasters than anticipated. Like my first couple of rounds when I was playing against Reanimator, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I was expecting. Not a lot of Bowmaster in these matchups that are sort of shooting at each other, and then I get to come in and snake wins against them while they're are not looking at Swords Plowshares decks. And then my back half was against Dimir Tempo and against this Grixis list that were just on like heavy Bowmaster lists, like both main deck 4 of Bowmaster lists. And it's like, okay, this is tough. This is going to be tough for me. But I was underprepared for it. And so like I have now moved towards trying to test things post board to be prepared for that. And then same thing, Cloud Post, that's a buy for my Cloud Post opponent. There's just never a world where you're ever beating Cloud Post as a shit pile of white cards. It's never going to happen.
You need to be on a back to basics list if you want to do that, and that's not your deck.
There's the notion that like no deck can beat every other deck. Like maybe if you have free wins, you can steal something, but like if you're playing a shit pile of white cards, you are never beating Cloud Post. So that's the world that we're in, and it was not close, and it was not going to be close, and I don't feel that it's interesting or whatever. It's just like that is the bad matchup, and we all have those, and we hope that we dodge them. But the guy who played it, cool dude, good player, and I'm sorry I couldn't have given him more interesting games.
Yeah.
For the last thing was Bant Nadu, and the tricky thing about Bant Nadu is that there's a couple versions, right? So the Nadu list that won the cup was sort of a more elvesy version of Nadu, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't playing blue cards. It was playing Allosaurus Shepherd in natural order.
Yep.
And then you have Cephalid Breakfast, was what you play, where you play Bant Nadu and you have a combo out win button in there. And then you have a bunch of players who are playing Bant Nadu, which doesn't have the Cephalid Breakfast package, is just playing Delighted Halfling plus Teferi and Nadu and trying to draw 8 cards every turn and bury you. And, maybe they have the way
that Bristly Bill out and you just
they can do like the sort of loop or whatever, but like the game is over before we ever get there, right? Like it's once they have 8 cards a turn, you don't take any more relevant game actions. They should have sort of built their own Atraxa. So but the one unifying factor between all those decks is Nadu and Teferi. I mean, I guess you could argue Teferi is out on the blue cards, but Nadu is in all of those lists, even whether they're combo or not. And so I realized that you need to be able to index for the different variations of Nadu. Now, they all win the same, which is Nadu's fucked up, and that means that the second that he touches the table, that the game ends. But the way that they do that is different. Like, you have 2 that are on Elves variants, and then you have 1 that is on, Cephalid Breakfast combo variant. And so having answers to be able to figure out, okay, well, I need to be able to beat Nadu out of a blue-white, Urza Saga combo deck. And then I need to beat Nadu out of a Delighted Halfling, make everything uncounterable deck. And then I need to beat Nadu that has a natural order follow-up if something else doesn't happen, so they can play at low resource. So there's a lot of variations of Nadu. And if you don't have a way to actually deal individually with the card Nadu, then you will lose to it because it showed up in, like, if you were to pair all of the Nadu lists together, the percentage that they play is very big. And the one thing, the combination that all of the Nadu lists have in common is they don't need the same piece. They just need to be able to target their shit. And Elves targets their own shit constantly to be able to go off. The Bant Nadu list is playing Nomads Encore, just not Shuko. And then you are on Breakfast and you played both. So Nadu is not easy to trigger and not easy to. Nadu is not difficult to trigger and not difficult to trigger ad nauseum every turn the second that it touches the table. So if it touches the table, you are going to go down a 3 to 4 to 1 exchange. Like they will draw 2 to 3 cards, if not more, and you will spend a card. And if they don't fight over it, then you will lose because the game will end effectively on that spot. So like Nadu really can't touch the table. So you have to have ways to prevent Nadu from touching the table. So everybody out there, like think about what that might be. Like at least test what that might be because you can't have Nadu touch the table.
Yeah.
The other thing and the reason why it can't touch the table was there was a moment where I played against Bant Nadu, one of the guys who actually top 8 of the event in the, I believe in the painting. Was it the painting or was it actually the cup? Let me check. I'm double checking.
I would say it was the painting because your Grixis control player is the only person that top 8'd that you played in the cup.
Yeah, so I'm double checking both events here. There was one game where I played it. No, it was in the painting. So I played against Bant Nadu in the painting. I played against a lot of Nadu in the second day. I played against no Dimir on the second day. My matchups were Nadu, Eldrazi, Cradle Control, Nadu, Jeskai Control, Mono Red Painter, Mono Red Prison. And so Dimir just totally absent from my experience at the painting. But the trick that happens with Nadu, and it happens more often, like it seems like it's a bad beat, but it actually, in my experience, has happened a ton, which is you target Nadu with whatever, and then they just flip a Force of Will or a Force of Negation.
Yeah.
And blanket.
Ugh.
Now, that like the reaction, and there were players that were watching our match that all reacted exactly as you just reacted.
Yeah.
Where I Sword Splashed the Nadu, he flipped the Force of Will for free, used that Force of Will to counter it, and then the game ended. And the reaction that you got of the like that happens. But my experience playing a lot of Nadu in the last couple of months is that happens a lot. Like the blind
there are
flip
4 Force of Wills in the deck, you know.
Like and they don't have to spend it on anything else, right? They just protect Nadu and then the game is over. So like they just have to protect the queen. So it's like, yeah, if the only thing that you ever need to do is protect Nadu the second that it touches the table, then the density of which you're going to encounter that play is just going to be more frequent. So like I don't think that that's a bad beat. I think that's actually an extremely common play pattern that I've run into a lot from personal experience. So
let's skip from the specifically Nadu talk, but let's move over to the painting.
Oh yeah. We can summarize that whole discussion of what I want to say is be prepared for like double check your, like you maybe having been preparing for Eternal Weekend using like data from the previous things, but like we're seeing like the stuff in paper I think is actually moving a lot faster than what we would normally anticipate. Like usually paper is a little bit behind Moto, and it doesn't seem to be the case at all. If like I think that we're like the over index of Bowmaster, the varieties of Nadu in paper, like players have the cards and are shifting to those decks. So I think just go back, redo your homework like a week ahead of Eternal Weekend just to see where things are at. Because I got punished because I was under indexed for Bowmaster. Yeah. And I could have been more prepared. And I just
Bowmaster and Nadu. Watch out for them. So let's talk about the win a art event, which I did actually get to play in this one. Sadly, I went like 2 and 5, 4 and 11 in games. The wheels fell off after I had the interview with Morrow. I was just in a different headspace by the time I got back, but I learned a lot. But I wanna just quick go over the top 8, and then I want to talk about some of the stuff, some of the plays I saw you make on as well. So the top 8 was Bant Nadu, Reanimator, Tempo. So Dimir Reanimator, Dimir Tempo, 4-color Loam, Dimir Reanimator, Mono Red Aggro, which is probably just we're looking at Bombardiers, and this is just the Mono Red Stompy list. And then Cloud Post again. Rares its ugly head. and Sneak and Show as the 8th. So that was that's an interesting pool of decks. Obviously, you still have Reanimator being pulled out here. Tempo is in here, but you get the red aggro deck. You get a Bant Nadu. It's a solid that's a good diversity, I would say, of what the meta looks like right here. And the green cloud post deck just kind of really being that's representing Eldrazi as a deck. So I think that's in line with what we're probably going to see as far as Eldrazi in some capacity.
Yeah. I mean, there were a couple of Eldrazi players in the room, and I mean, if there were just anything special or spicy about them, I didn't see it. It was sort of run of the mill, aggro Eldrazi as you expect with the souped up MH3 cards that are, Reality Smasher is gone, but Thought Knot and the Michael Spawn and the high end game with the lands that are busted is still just there in force. And then they play Devourer so they can set up their draws and just be more consistent doing the, simple thing they do every game. And no longer are incidental hate pieces actually good, because between the kicker Eldrazi that I always forget the name of, that can get rid of hate pieces that would otherwise blank them, and Devourer of Destiny to exile colored permanents, means that they just are not soft to shit like, Back to Basics or Moat, because all their spells cost half of what they do because of their lands, and so they can just cast that stuff and then exile it on triggers. So you need both the hate piece and then the consigns or whatever additional protection. But Eldrazi is I think Eldrazi is had this been the Eldrazi back when Eldrazi was good, in its first iteration, this Eldrazi would have been leagues better. Because
agreed.
They just don't fold the hate pieces and nearly as easy.
They don't just lose to Moat.
Yeah, but before it's you had to survive to cast Moat through wastelands and shit. Yeah. But now it's nope. They just have they on top of their beaters that give them selection, it's also removal. And Kolaghan's Command is a huge upgrade because now they can interact meaningfully against a lot of the format.
Kozilek's Command.
What did I say?
Kolaghan's Command.
Kozilek's Command.
Different K.
Kozilek's Command actually is the command that I wish I could have, which is draw cards, interact with your graveyard, make mana.
You could if you just started playing, bunch of colorless lands in your decks.
No, man. You see, colorless mana gets access to everything you could ever want all in one thing. Yeah. Where if you're playing blue and white, you can only have the things that green gets.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the takeaways from this tournament that both tournaments that I wanted to highlight here, aside from what the meta looks like, is that you had some real success with the card Extract. Tell people about Extract, Phil.
Yeah, I was testing out Extract because we've had episodes Zach, you want to point to the how to control the narrative of a game episode that's hovering above your head right now? So what's cool about the things that we talk about is we actually implement them in when we try and play the game. We don't just talk smoke. So one thing that I had figured out was when I was playing against Dimir Reanimator, the problem that I had with it, this is before realizing that people are starting to really surge back towards Bowmaster. So Bowmaster is its own issue, but let's step aside from that now. Bowmaster is its own issue, needs its own problem-solving tools. But the problem that I ran into with the Reanimator was I really wanted to be able to play effectively against them and line up my spells and play efficient, do all this stuff. And what I realized was I couldn't move because they always could threaten Atraxa, right? If they held up a black mana, they can threaten Entomb, which threatens Atraxa on the following turn. And so if I go shields down for that at any point, they can kill me. And so I was they implicitly have the narrative of being able to reanimate Atraxa that ends the game on the spot, which means that I can never move because they have the narrative from the start of the game. And so I was how do I take back control of the narrative? And I was well, if the play pattern that I fear is specifically Entomb into reanimate Atraxa, not Entomb into reanimate Archon, that just puts them up a card, me down a card, but I get to Swords to Plowshares it, and it's fine. Okay. When Atraxa's on the table, they just tutor the top 10 cards of their deck to line up exactly in the position that they're in, and then you never take another relevant game action. Yeah. So I was I need to be able to deal with exactly Entomb reanimate Atraxa. And the way that I could do that proactively was Extract. Now, what's cool about Extract, it's a blue mana, it lets you search their library, take a card out of it,
and remove it from the game
and
specifically.
remove it from the game. So what would happen is if you opened Extract and played it, you take the Atraxa out of the deck, and now they no longer have the narrative, right?
Yeah.
They like the only thing that they can really threaten is whatever they have in post board, which is usually they bring in some number of their Bowmasters, or if they're ever on Dauthi Voidwalker, but that seems to have sort of subsided because it's a little too slow. Excuse me. Or they have Archon, or if they have another fatty, it's another fatty that is not an Atraxa. I'm not sure what the other fatty would be. Some people told me that some people have pivoted back over to Grizzlebrand. You were telling me that people were playing Valgavoth, and Valgavoth against a Swords to Plowshares player is going to be very good. Valgavoth against me, who's also the Terminus guy, is going to be a lot worse. So I don't fear that nearly as much, because Valgavoth doesn't put you up cards, and I have Terminus as an answer. So I was like, it's specifically Atraxa. I have to solve this problem. And so Atraxa, being able to proactively take Atraxa out of the deck so that they no longer have that narrative, lets me play at the pace and exchanges that I want to play at without having to fear dying at any moment. And then the other cool thing is when you have studied enough, when you've done your homework, and you know more or less the foundation of what all the decks that are in the top field of the top of the meta look like. Of course, some people vary on their numbers. How many Barrow Ghosts you playing? How many Bowmaster you playing in your 75? Are you playing Force of Negation? Are you not? Are you playing other forms of hate? Are you not? What's your graveyard hate of choice? Are you on Ghost Vacuum or on Licensed Hearse or Fairy Macabre? There's some variation to that. But for the most part, like the fundamentals, like the basics, you're like, how many Wasteland are you on? How many days are you on? Right? Like most Dimir Reanimator lists are on 3. But if you are presuming that they're on, if you want to play as though they're on 4, you can. Most Dimir Reanimator lists are on 3 Wasteland. If you want to play like they're on 4 Wasteland, you can. But for the most part, you know the ranges of the most played cards that are the glue, like the shells of the deck, the Days Wasteland shell that has propped up every busted deck since its existence. So one other thing that Extract does is if you know your homework and you can sift through the deck fast enough, you know you're taking the Atraxa. But you sift through the deck fast enough, you see what other sideboard cards they brought in, cool. But then the rest of it is you count their Force Wills, you count their Dazes, you count their Brainstorms, you count their Ponders, and you go, oh, I have effectively deduced what the majority of your hand, if not your entire hand, is. And it's like, oh, not only did this Extract tell me that I no longer have to play around the narrative of losing to Atraxa because it's not there anymore, I also get to learn that that I have to play around the days that I know for a fact is now currently in your hand.
It effectively gives you like a Gitaxian probe, at least for the common stuff.
Yeah, so like the real power that I found was, the real power was eliminating the narrative that I can lose on the spot and being able to actually play a game where I don't have to, I can actually go shields down sometimes without fear of auto dying. But then the back end of like actually where it then served pretty powerfully was that you just sort of then learn their hand in that moment, and learning their hand of like how they're going to develop, because like you can count all of the other things. How many Trolls of Khazad-dûm are in your hand? Are you about to cycle it? How many Wastelands do you have? You can figure out like on the number, knowing how many Wastelands. Typically I've seen Reanimator players on 2 Undercity Sewers. Like, are they both in the deck? How many fetches? If you know how many fetches the stock lists play, count their fetches, and then like, do they have a fetch in hand or do they have a basic in hand? Like they have the swamp and the island. Like you can just if you just have like studied enough to like know those numbers for those decks, you can sift through fast enough. Way faster. You could sift through and figure out everything that you need to figure out, casting Extract and doing the thing that you brought it in to do, faster than a Doomsday player trying to figure out their pile.
I also watched you just murder the Upsal Spells deck by taking Thassa's Oracle out of the deck, and then her next play was drop a Simian Spirit Guide onto the board after dropping 2 other Simian Spirit Guides to pay for it.
Once I stripped the Thassa's Oracle out of Upsal Spells, the plan
exactly the narrative is over. Yeah.
So they still had Bridge. They still had Bridge from below. So we got to the point where I Mystic Sanctuary, Extract, and extracted the Bridge.
Yeah.
And then once the Bridge and the Thassa's Oracle were gone, their out was play my Balustrade Spy, target you.
Yeah. Mill you for some number of cards.
Like we hope this works. We hope this is going to get there.
I appreciated that play a lot.
Here's the thing. It was a very smart heads up play that let you know that the player had not encountered their win conditions getting stripped before.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It was not like they had to like go in the tank and be like, is there an out here? Like they just knew that was what the out was, however slim it might have been.
Yeah.
Narrator came in and goes, it was not powerful enough.
Yeah.
But no, like I think because I wasn't playing any Force of Negations, because I just like a lot of the things that I care about in the format right now. It's like I care about Teferi Time Raveler as like a very individual piece that can like blank my whole deck, but otherwise the things that you care about are Bowmaster and Nadu, and or like the other things that you would care about with Force of Negation. It's like maybe the One Ring, but otherwise those decks that are playing One Ring, really you care about selling Myco Spawn. And so it's like Force of Negation just doesn't tag any of those. And then also, if a player who does need to play around Force of Negation is thinking about playing around Force of Negation, they can just play around Force of Negation. And so I was like, it's not like where you'd bring it, like when Beanstalk was around and people have to sorcery speed their Beanstalk, you're like, well, you're not playing around Force of Negation because you were just trying to cast an enchantment that your entire deck revolves around that soups it up from a 3 to a 10. So you kind of need to play your Force Negations just to fight a metagame of Up the Beanstalk. But when Up the Beanstalk is really nowhere to be found, the Force Negations in my mind sort of went down. So I was like, oh man, I'm actually going to be underprepared for Ubisoft spells until Extract strips the Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I mean, we got a pretty good idea of how good Extract is. Obviously, how prevalent I think Dimir Reanimator is going to be at Eternal Weekend. Certainly, a couple other decks knowing about how to spot the different kind of Nadu decks. So I don't know. My takeaway here was that Eternal Weekend was an absolute blast, super fun. It was great to see everybody out. What's that?
Eternal Weekend.
Sorry, Magic Con Las Vegas. I'm sure Eternal Weekend will also be fun. But yeah, Magic Con Vegas was a blast. So many people. We got to see so many people. I forgot this person's name in our pre-show, which if you remember, you can listen to our pre-show. That is through Patreon. Don't use iTunes to join us. Use go on the website and join us because they charge you extra for some reason. But Krista was the person that had recognized me by my voice. So that was super cool to just like have people walk up to us and be like, "Hey, I think I know you," but they just listen to the podcast and don't watch the show. So that's always cool. But yeah, no, I think I had a super good time, and I'm looking forward to Magic Con Chicago, of course, and of course Eternal Weekend. So I always say this, but if you see us at Eternal Weekend, do not hesitate to say hello. We love that. That's a super blast for us. So we always appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun getting to meet everybody, and I see other like content creators getting asked to sign a bunch of stuff. Like, I played against Bosch, and he was asked like the moment that our round was done, people were like, "Can you sign my cards? Can you sign my playmat?" So like, that's like a common thing. Whereas like that's pretty infrequent for us. But I did have a friend of the pod ask me to sign his playmat, and that was really fun. I got to sign his Clarion Academy playmat, which was sweet.
The funny thing about that is, so there was a person who asked you and Bosch to sign something while I was sitting there, and I was like, oh, that person doesn't only listens to the show, and I hadn't said anything, so they didn't ask me, even though I was right there, and I wasn't going to like insert myself and be like, I can sign this too, like.
You should have, man. You should have. Like,
yeah, I was like, it's whatever. It's not a big deal.
You sure you don't want me to sign that as well?
Yeah, I mean, but I'll gladly sign stuff. Yeah, we've got some cool stuff in the works for Eternal Weekend. So that should be, I don't know, it'll be a lot of fun.
It was fun. Vegas was fun. It was great to see that like the legacy community actually show up the way that we hoped when we were pitching those legacy events.
Thank you guys.
Because I don't know if those legacy events were like promoted really anywhere other than us saying that there's going to be legacy events at these things now.
Yeah.
So the fact that like we got the turnout that we did at those events was super great. Awesome. And also that there were legacy event, like we also know that there were legacy players at the con that just like had things that they needed to do, and so they couldn't play. Like we know Anurag is a legacy player, and had he not had to be like moving around
as busy as we were, at least,
like had that been like we would have had other legacy players. So there's like we know that the it's good that they can see that the demand and the is there, and that the players will actually show up, because that means that they can just continue to have them on the schedule for Magic Cons, but then also potentially like make them bigger, level them up, change up the prize pools to make them even bigger, even though I think the prize pools are pretty solid. Like win a painting, like there was already like before the painting was even done, I'm forgetting his name, but he handles he's like the big art collector that does the art showcases. He does a panel at all the Magic Cons. I'm blanking on his name right now, but I'll remember it and we'll put it in show notes. But he tweeted before the legacy for artwork was over, because the top 8 happened the following day. But he tweeted, he was like, "Whoever wins the legacy painting, hit me up because I want to buy it." So like, if you were, it's like if you didn't actually want to keep the painting, you were like, "I would really love to just sell this for however much money I can get for it." So like, actually have won the the prize pool. Because like there was just it's Will Scion of whatever. Like it wasn't
Scion
a
of Peace,
card. It's not. It's like not a good card. It's
Not a
not
legacy
played.
card.
Maybe it's an EDH card
It's
or whatever.
a cool looking, like
Great
amazing
art.
looking art.
Great
Yeah.
art. Yeah, totally. But it's like that's not a known card that would fetch the cash value of like a super well played card. Like I think the artwork for Orcish Bowmaster sucks. But if the artwork for Orcish Bowmaster is up for grabs because it has such clout as a dominating competitive card, it would have a higher price tag, right? So like the fact that there was already a buyer for that art for however much that goes for, and you have to imagine that it's in the thousands at minimum. So it's like that's just a good payout for your tournament that you played,
All right. Well, again, thank you for everybody for watching. If you like this episode, click the buttons below, subscribe, like, all that stuff. Comment, please. Let us know if you went to the con, if you saw us, if you had fun, or if you're thinking about coming to Chicago, or you're going to Eternal Weekend.
And also comment with whatever, like I was using Extract as a tool to try and regain the narrative, but like that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. If there are other tools that you are thinking of or have been testing on the same basis of trying to retake the narrative, share that shit.
Please.
We are testing right now. We need we need those gems. We're looking for stuff. So share that with the other Dirtles listeners so we can all try and steal the narrative back and forth.
Yes. And with that said, we'll catch you guys next time. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribing to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurtles. Thanks so much for watching.